my story. I was on this path of a debilitating progressive disease.
When there was a diagnosis, life became supporting her journey to wellness. I mean, everything changed.
Maybe it was a form of denial, but I never pictured myself as being an invalid, being crippled.
So at first it was compassion, then it was concern about whether this was the life I was going to live for the remainder of my life. At age 20, whatever by then, it's not what I had bargained for.
I had no idea what I would do, and I obviously had a lot of homework to do, and I wanted to read everything written, so I found any book, any article that I could about ankylosing spondylitis. I know that modern medicine has provided lots of wonderful solutions, and most of them are chemically based, but I also felt that nature has answers. All of the literature said non-steroidal anti-inflammatories is the way to go. So I made a deal with myself that I was going to stay on the medicine for a few months just so that I can get a hold of what it felt like to be in not so much pain. With my research, I kept seeing fusion, tightness, stiffness. Yoga is the opposite of all of those things: flexibility, stretching, opening up. I said, well, that sounds like a good idea.
If you're in a situation where your joints are fusing together, well, stretching them apart makes it harder for the disease to do its thing.
The first yoga class that I went to, when I started the first pose of bending down and trying to touch my toes, I got down to kind of the top of my knees. Reality set in on how inflexible I was, how rigid my body had gotten at such an early age, and I had a long way to go.
The biggest benefit of yoga that I found is twofold. I would say that one, people get to know themselves a lot better in a much truer sense of who they are. The second benefit is that they find that they can relieve themselves of a lot of pain and stress through the yoga practice.
It was also pretty interesting when June turned around and finished with the medication, said, I'm not doing this. I can't feel my body when I'm under medication, and I'm not going to be able to figure out what to do.
I wanted to really feel how my body was reacting to the yoga. There were a lot of times that I was actually in more pain at the end of my yoga class than before, but something intuitively inside me said, it's good pain, it's okay. In some way I was getting better, even though it was still very painful.
She would come out of class many days crying from the pain, and then she'd go back the next day.
It was a 7-day-a-week, an 1.5 to 2-hour program. I didn't miss a day of practice. I would get to a point where I was making progress, the yoga was continuing, and I was getting more limber, and then I would hit a wall. I was experiencing lots of muscle spasms.
June then heard about something called structural integration, or Rolfing.
Structural integration is basically a hands-on modality of working on the fascia or connective tissue in the body, smoothing out any tight areas or knots, you could say, in the muscles.
As June started to venture into non-traditional forms, indigenous forms of healing, my attitude was, stay with the doctors, they know what they're doing. And I realized that I was either going to support her on this journey or we were going to drift.
One of June's doctors recommended she look up Mark Koffel. Koffel studied Rolfing with its founder, Ida Rolf, at Esalen, a New Age therapy center in Big Sur, California.
I was very eager to meet Mark Koffel. Before I met him, I did a little research as to what is Rolfing, what is structural integration. Mark had me lay down on a massage table and started using his hands, his knuckles, his elbows to move those parts of his body across my body to do these Rolfing strokes. And it was the most painful experience that I ever had. It was more painful than the sciatica nerve pain that I would have shooting down. And yet, when I was noticing that some parts of my body, even though he was working just as deep, there would be no pain at all. So I was starting to understand that the areas that were so painful were the areas that were all knotted up, that were all spasming, that was all congested.
Everything is related, so it's not just one piece.
He explained to me that the fascia was this connective web, this clear, translucent lining that kept the muscles the way that they were.
Imagine like a shirt and you have a little thread and you pull the thread, but you see the line of pull go all the way up here. The fascia runs in our body in a very similar manner to that.
It made so much sense to me. The areas that were so painful were the areas that were all knotted up. So every Wednesday, same time, Lee and I would come and he would systematically work different parts of my body. Over time, the intensity of the pain was getting less and less, and also the amount of relief that I had between sessions was getting longer and longer. So I knew something was happening.
It was yoga and the deep tissue, and the food choices became more and more organic, for the family, and we built a biodynamic garden for our food. And we specifically picked biodynamic. It became part of life.
Light meals, more frequent, smaller meals seemed to be the key.
June practiced yoga and structural integration for the 4 years following her ankylosing spondylitis diagnosis. Her back pain was now under control. June and Lee believed the therapies were working and her disease was being reversed, but without testing, they couldn't be sure. They needed clinical proof.
We scheduled a follow-up appointment with Dr. Bluestone. We got to his office and he was very happy to see me, and he asked what he could do for me, and I said, I would like your professional opinion as to where my body is today, especially compared to where I was the last time I visited you. The lab work showed that all of the blood levels that usually show increases when there's active inflammation were all normal. He ordered a new set of x-rays, and he showed us on the films where the fusion had actually gotten less and the erosive widening had gotten smaller.
She never fused those joints, and she never lost good posture, and she never developed deformity because she did her job, which was to stay mobile.
He then wanted to check my range of motion, and he started lifting my leg up, and it kept going, and he was expecting it to go to about here, and then it kept going and going and going and going and going and going, and then when it was like back in here, he said, I think we've gone far enough. I think I've got the information that I need. And he then pronounced me that I have obviously found a unique form of remission.
I just sat there smiling. It was fun. It was great.
In all his years of practicing as a rheumatologist and being a specialist in ankylosing spondylitis, he had never seen the disease actually reverse itself.
I think June's experience has given me enormous pleasure. She is the poster child for how the person with ankylosing spondylitis must maintain mobility.
I was ecstatic, and I said, yes, we did it.
I think she has the same outlook for a healthy future as any other healthy woman of her age.
I feel that the discipline of the constant yoga practice was really instrumental. I just kept practicing, and it came, the cure came. I don't think anybody can get better without the attitude that they will get better. It's what you think and what you say and what you do, when they all line up, is when you get the results.
It wasn't until years later that I found out, through teaching thousands of other students, that she was actually practicing at a much higher, mature level than I was used to experiencing.
I always visualized that I would be well and I would be active and that I would be normal.
Yoga has made a huge difference in our lives. It was a complete integration of balance, of strength, and balance of flexibility.
In the early days, I didn't have a passion. My passion now is wellness, yoga, nature, rainforest, environment, my family.
I see June just getting younger and healthier all the time. She's a true miracle.
It's been fabulous.
He has been so loving and so supportive, and I'm so happy that on that wedding day, I said I do, and he said I do. It's been really a great journey.
We know that sooner or later, everybody ages, but I have a wife who's younger physically and mentally today than she was 20 years ago.